Welcome to Torat Andalus. We are in class 79 of Golden Doves. Page 43. First full paragraph, it's going to be the middle of a paragraph, right? Because we were studying about Emil Benveniste's theory of the personal pronoun and how that affects, or creates rather, our individuality to a certain extent. Or allows us to assert our individuality. There is also now Saussure. So a few remarks on Saussure's distinction between language, langue, and speech, parole, will clarify this point. So you know what, let me go back to the beginning of the paragraph. There's another aspect worth considering of Benveniste's category of person, which is what we've been discussing the last few classes. Person is real only in the act of speech. It's interesting. So it's the act of speech that makes a person real again. Remember the Targum, Vahi Adam leNefesh Haya, what makes him alive? That he speaks, right? Or in discourse. So during a conversation, there is the that's what creates the person in a sense. Okay. In fact, the category of person is the ground upon which language is turned into instances of discourse. It's only because you have person that you can have instances of discourse and language. Of course, because the discourse takes place between persons in the plural. A few remarks on Saussure's distinction between language, langue, and speech, parole, will clarify this point. So again, the point that we want to clarify is that the category of person is what allows language to be turned into discourse, right? So let's look at Ferdinand de Saussure. And here it is. Language is the whole set of linguistic habits which allow an individual to understand and be understood. So you have the langue, or the language. That includes the vocabulary, that includes the grammatical rules, that includes syntax. So that's like a giant iceberg, right? It is the entire set of linguistic conventions or conventions of any particular language. Now that's not communication, that's just the system of the language. Right? It has a social context because everybody in society understands those conventions. We understand the rules of grammar, we understand the syntax, how to speak. Jack and Jill ran up the hill, not up the hill ran Jack, ran Jill, right? That has to do with syntax. We all know, so that's why it's social, the community of speakers. And it exists only by virtue of a sort of contract signed by members of the community. It's a contract signed by members of the community in the sense that we all agree that this is the way we're going to speak. We're going to say, I want to eat lunch because I am hungry, right? I'm not going to say, I hungry eat lunch because, right? So that's the proper order of the words. As such, language transcends the individual and the community of speakers. So you see, language is something that's greater than the individual in the sense that the individual is under the system of language and operates within the system of language. And so also the community of speakers. We all operate under this system. It is possible, but what we're studying now, I know it sounds really perhaps dry and, arcane. It's not. What we're studying now will help you understand the relationship between peshat and derasha, right? It's really deep stuff, and we didn't just. My father, didn't just put this in the book, and I'm not just teaching it just like that. Right? It's really important to understand rabbinic thinking. So continuing. As such, we said, it is possible to penetrate a dead language and properly assimilate its linguistic facts. So for example, let's say there's a language that's no longer spoken. I don't know, maybe ancient Sumerian. So you can look at the rules of ancient Sumerian based upon the text and how they use grammar and how they use syntax and how the language worked, even though it's a dead language. So the lang doesn't require the community of speakers, right? Even without the community of speakers, the lang exists. Speech is the individual act of speaking, but then there's a parole. Parole is like the tip of the iceberg. So you have the entire iceberg, and then you have the manifestation of the iceberg above the water. The manifestation of the iceberg above the water is smaller than the actual iceberg, of course, because it's an instance of speech, right? So it's individual act of speaking. Speaking is thus not a collective instrument. Its manifestations are individual and momentary. I choose what words to use in my speech. I choose what adjectives, how to describe what I'm experiencing. It's all up to me, the speaker, right? So it's a very individual thing. So you see this tension between lang, which is the entire system, which subsumes the community of speakers, but then the individual instances of speech are personal and individual. Speaking is thus not a collective instrument. Its manifestations are individual and momentary, right? Because at this moment I can speak this way, and then maybe later on I'll speak in a different way, right? I intentionally decide to change the tenor of my speech. Linguistic subjectivity is the function of speech. So do you notice how when I speak in my unique way, I'm asserting my subjectivity. That's called linguistic subjectivity, because A, I assert myself in the discourse as me, right, as I, and B, because I choose the particular parole that I want to choose. Language is impersonal, and it excludes the category of person, right? So the system of language, as we said, ancient Sumerian, doesn't require a specific individual. The system of language is what the system of ancient Sumerian is, irrespective of whether there are Sumerians who can use that language. And here's a quote. Now, a language, lang, is a socialized structure which the act of speaking, parole, subjects to individual and intersubjective ends, thus adding to it a new and strictly personal design. Right? Lang is a system common to everyone. Discourse is both the bearer of a message and the instrument of action. I will explain that last paragraph in the next class.